For years, most of my academic career actually, I dismissed this kind of thing entirely. Numbers on a wallet, codes written on paper to attract money. I'd heard of it. I'd raised an eyebrow at it, and I'd moved on. The way you do when your father is a historian at UCL, and your professional identity is built on primary sources and manuscript evidence. You learn early that anything that smells like magic gets filed under wishful thinking and quietly forgotten. But there was a problem. And the problem was my mother who was born in Suka, in the heart of Igboland. My mother, who kept a small cloth pouch sewn with specific numbers she said her own grandmother had given her, tucked inside the lining of her handbag for the entirety of my childhood. She never explained it to me in terms I could cross-reference with a journal article. She just called it alignment. She said some numbers carry the breath of God and some don't, and that a woman who knows the difference is a woman who never goes without. I spent about 30 years believing she was sincere, but mistaken. Then I found the Sefer Yetzirah, not in a bookshop, in a temperature-controlled archive room at the British Museum. I was there to cross-check a detail about Solomonic amulets for a paper I was writing, completely unrelated to anything numerical. And I opened this 2,000-year-old text and read, in translation, that creation itself happened through 10 sephiro and 22 letters, and that the word sephirot, which most people today understand as spiritual emanations, originally meant something far more specific. It meant numbers, measures, quantities. I sat there for probably 20 minutes without writing a single note, because I had just realized that the oldest text in Jewish mysticism, a text scholars date to somewhere between the 2nd and 6th century of the Common Era, a text Arya Kaplan spent years translating and annotating for modern readers, a text that influenced everyone from medieval Kabbalists to Renaissance philosophers, was telling me that the fundamental architecture of the universe was numerical, not metaphorically, literally. And I remembered the pouch in my mother's handbag. Before I go further, if this kind of discovery, the kind that doesn't let you sleep until you've followed it all the way through, if this resonates with you, the subscribe button tells the algorithm to bring you more of it. I have spent years in these archives, and I have many more nights like this one ahead of me. Let me back up, because I need to tell you what I was actually looking for before this found me. And I need to tell you why the question of numbers on a wallet is so much more interesting and so much more documented than most people on either side of the argument are willing to admit. I had been, for months before this, working through a particular tension in the scholarly literature around wealth in the Solomonic tradition. The tension is this: Solomon is described in 1 Kings as the wealthiest individual in the ancient world, not the wealthiest king in his region, the wealthiest person anywhere. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14 says he received 666 talents of gold per year. Cambridge scholars who've done the conversion estimate that figures somewhere around 1.1 billion US dollars in modern value per year from a single revenue stream. Now, 666 is a number that has accumulated a lot of modern baggage, but the scholars I trust most read it as a deliberate literary construction, a numerical signature that linked Solomon's wealth to a specific framework in Deuteronomy about the responsibilities of kings. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was intentional numerical encoding. Solomon's scribes knew exactly what they were writing, and they chose that number because numbers, to the ancient Hebrew mind, were not decorative. They were structural. This is where it gets strange, because I started pulling on that thread, and it didn't lead where I expected. I expected to find religious symbolism. I found behavioral economics. There is a study, thus, and I want to be precise here, because precision is the only thing that separates a genuine insight from wishful thinking. There is a study from the University of Cologne, published in 2010 in Psychological Science by Damisch and her colleagues. They ran 4 controlled experiments examining what happens when people believe they have a lucky object or a lucky number. Not in a laboratory that tests the object itself, in laboratories that test the person holding the object. What they found was that belief in a symbolic number or object measurably increases what psychologists call self-efficacy, your confidence in your own ability to perform a task, and that this increase in self-efficacy translates into objectively better performance. People hold fewer putts. People persisted longer on difficult puzzles. The mechanism was not magic. The mechanism was that the symbol changed something inside the person holding it. I nearly dismissed this immediately because I have my father's instincts, and my father would say, "That's just confidence, Emika. You've explained away the mystery." But I kept reading, because then I found the Vancouver study. Researchers at the University of British Columbia, Fortin, Hill, and Huang, published in 2014, spent years analyzing property transactions in Vancouver, Canada. They found something that should not exist in a rational market. Houses with addresses ending in the number 8 sold with a 2.5% premium over comparable properties. Houses with addresses containing the number 4, which in Cantonese and Mandarin sounds like the word for death, sold at a 2.2% discount. Let me say that plainly. In a modern, Western, supposedly rational real estate market, a single digit in a street address moved prices by nearly 5%, not because the house was different, not because the plumbing was better, because of what the number meant to the people who wanted to live there. Now I started to feel something shift, because here is what I had been trained to believe. Numerical symbolism is a projection of human pattern seeking onto an indifferent universe. It's our brain doing what brains do, finding shapes in clouds. And that may be partially true. But there is another layer to this, and the layer I had been missing was that even if the universe doesn't care about the number 8, the market does. And the market is reality. You can't make a 2.5% premium disappear by explaining it away philosophically. I also need to tell you something that complicated all of this further. In the months I spent going deeper into this research, I kept running into people online who had tried wealth codes and come away burned. Someone on a forum wrote something that stopped me cold. They said, "I tried writing numbers on my wallet for 6 months. Nothing changed. Now I feel like an idiot. And I'm worse off because I spent those 6 months waiting for magic instead of doing something real." That hit me. Because that person's experience is completely legitimate. There is a version of numerical practice that is genuinely just superstition dressed up as ancient wisdom. The Grabovoi codes, a system invented by a Russian man who was later convicted of fraud, spread through the internet on the promise that writing specific number sequences could heal disease and summon money. That practice has no scholarly foundation. It has no behavioral mechanism. It is exactly the kind of thing my father was right to be suspicious of. But here is the distinction that changes everything. And it's a distinction that most people on both sides of this argument miss entirely. The Grabovoi codes are based on the idea that the numbers act on the external world. Write this sequence, and the universe adjusts. The Solomonic tradition, the Gematria documented by Moshe Idol, the Sephiro of the Sefer Yetzirah, the behavioral evidence from Cologne and Vancouver, is based on something completely different. The numbers act on the person who carries them. The mechanism is internal. The transformation is psychological. And because psychology determines behavior, and behavior determines outcomes, the numbers work not because they change the universe directly, because they change you. And you change the universe. This is not a small distinction. It's the difference between a ritual and a technology. I almost stopped here. I genuinely considered it. It was late. I had been in that archive for hours. My notes had spread across 3 notebooks, and I still hadn't written the paragraph I'd come in to write about Solomonic amulets. I was exhausted, and I was starting to feel the particular discomfort of a person who has been building toward a conclusion that will require him to change his mind. But there was one more thing I hadn't checked yet, and once I thought of it, I couldn't ignore it. The Beijing Olympics. The opening ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games began at exactly 20 hours, 8 minutes, and 8 seconds on the 8th day of the 8th month of the year 2008. 8 at 8, O A8, O Ga 8, on 8, 8, O Da 8. The Chinese government, a government not known for sentimental decision-making, coordinated the most expensive event in Olympic history, a spectacle directed by Zhang Yimou and built on a $42 billion investment around a single numerical alignment. Because the number 8 in Chinese sounds like the word for prosperity and wealth, because 1.4 billion people genuinely believe it matters. The GDP of Beijing grew 9.8% that year. Now, I need to stop and be honest with you about what happened in me at this point. Because I am, at my core, an academic. My father made sure of it. And academics are trained to say, correlation is not causation. Belief in a number didn't grow Beijing's GDP. That was for an investment, infrastructure, political signaling, and a dozen other macroeconomic forces that had nothing to do with the number 8. And yet a government of rationalists chose 880808 deliberately because they understood something about collective psychology, about how symbols move people, about how the felt reality of a number inside the minds of billions of participants can shift behavior in ways that show up in economic data. And that is when I stopped arguing against my mother, because what she knew, what the Igbo tradition preserved, what the Hebrew Kabbalists documented, what the Chinese government operationalized, was not magic in the sense my father meant when he used the word to dismiss things. It was precision. It was technology. It was an ancient understanding that the symbols you carry in your body, the numbers you write in your physical space, the codes you allow to be present in your daily life, these things do not work on the universe. They work on you. And you work on the universe. Let me tell you what the Sefer Yetzirah actually says. The text opens by asserting that God created the world through 3 things: text, number, and communication. The Hebrew word for number here is sefer, the same root as the word for book, the same root as the word for sapphire, the same root that becomes sephiro in Kabbalistic tradition. Numbers are not external measurements imposed on reality. In this framework, numbers are the material from which reality is woven. Moshe Edel, who teaches at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and is probably the most rigorous scholar of Kabbalah working today, spends considerable effort in his 1988 book, Kabbalah, New Perspectives distinguishing between what Gematria was originally and what it has become in popular culture. The original practice was not fortune-telling. It was not a lottery system. It was what Idle calls a technology of alignment, a method by which a practitioner brought their own consciousness into resonance with creative forces that operated on numerical frequencies. The difference between that and write these numbers on your wallet for fast cash is the difference between surgery and a bandage. Both involve the body. Only one changes anything real. And Solomon understood this distinction, not as mysticism, as governance. The sabbatical year in Deuteronomy, the Shemitah, operates on the number 7. Every 7 years, debts are forgiven. Land lies fallow. The economic system resets. This is not poetry. This was actual Israelite law. Solomon, who Proverbs credits with writing 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs, structured his administrative system around cycles of 7. His 7-year building project for the temple. His 7 years for the construction of his own palace. 7 as the number of completion and return. The Hebrew word Gad, which means fortune or luck, has a Gematria value of 7. The same word root that gives us the tribe of Gad associated with military success and prosperity. This is not coincidence in the Hebraic world. It is design. Let me tell you what I mean when I say Gematria is design rather than coincidence. When Solomon's court assigned numerical values to letters and found that Gad equaled 7, they weren't discovering a happy accident. They were recognizing that the same numerical frequency that governs cyclical completion, the seventh day of rest, the seventh year of economic reset, also governs the Hebrew concept of fortune. 7 was the number of enough. 7 was the number of the full cycle. And fortune, in the Solomonic understanding, was not a windfall. It was the right alignment with the natural rhythm of completion and return. You work for 6, you rest in 7, and in that rest, the field restores itself. That is not mysticism. That is agricultural economics expressed in the language of spiritual technology. Then there is 8. 8 in Hebrew numerology represents what comes after the complete cycle of 7. It is the number of new beginnings, of resurrection, of what exists beyond the natural order. Circumcision in Jewish tradition happens on the 8th day. The moment a child enters into a different kind of existence. The Umayyad Caliphate's scholars, when they built the Dome of the Rock on the site Solomon had sanctified, used an octagonal base. 8 directions and 8 sides. The University of British Columbia proved that modern buyers in a Western city unconsciously pay a premium for the number 8 because the human nervous system still carries, somewhere below articulation, the ancestral memory that 8 means something is beginning that could not begin before. I want to be specific about what the Vancouver study tells us because I think most people read it as a curiosity and miss the deeper implication. The researchers weren't studying irrational behavior. They were studying rational behavior operating on a different informational system. The buyers who paid a premium for an 8 address weren't foolish. They were responding to a signal that their culture had trained them to receive. And they were paying real money to live in a space that their unconscious mind categorized as aligned with abundance and new beginnings. The mechanism worked, not despite rationality, within a different kind of rationality, a rationality that includes the symbolic as structurally real. Solomon built his entire administrative and economic philosophy on exactly this kind of rationality. And then there is 18, Chai, the Hebrew word for life, Chet Yud, 8 plus 10, 18. It is not a coincidence, and I want to say this as carefully as I can. It is not a coincidence that Jewish tradition has maintained for millennia the practice of donating charity in multiples of 18. When I give to support a community, I give $18, or 36, or 72. Not because I am superstitious, because I am participating in a living technology of intention. The act of giving in multiples of the number for life is a physical encoding of the belief that generosity flows back, that the circuit is real, that the number is not the magic, it is the container that shapes the action. And here is what the behavioral research on giving confirms, without reference to any spiritual tradition. People who give consistently, who build generosity into their regular financial behavior, develop what psychologists call an abundance mindset, an internal conviction that there is enough, and that conviction changes how they negotiate, how they invest, how they present themselves in situations where financial decisions are made. The number 18 doesn't summon money from the air. It encodes a posture, and that posture is real. Solomon, who received 666 talents of gold per year, understood something that our modern financial frameworks do not teach, that the containers we use to organize our relationship with wealth are not neutral. The psychological infrastructure of prosperity is built from symbols, numbers, rituals of attention. He who controls the symbolic architecture controls the economic behavior of the people within it. This is why the 3 numbers are not a cheat code. They are a reminder. 7 reminds you that cycles are real, that nothing you are experiencing right now, financial pressure, scarcity, the feeling of being stuck, is permanent. Cycles end. Every 7, something resets. If you carry 7 in your consciousness and write it in your physical space, you are not summoning magic. You are encoding into your nervous system the knowledge that this is not forever. And that knowledge changes how you act, what risks you take, what you are willing to endure. There is something specific about what happens to a person who genuinely internalizes the cyclical model. I have seen it in my own life when I was finishing my doctoral thesis, and I was finishing it in 3 weeks of complete isolation, sleeping 4 hours a night, convinced that I had made a fundamental error in my methodology that would invalidate 3 years of work. My mother called me from Tsuka. I told her I was exhausted and scared. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Emeka, what number are you in?" I didn't understand the question. She said, "Every hard thing has a 7. You are not at the end. You are at the 6. I didn't find that comforting at the time. I found it slightly irritating, if I'm honest. But she was right. The thesis was fine. The defense went well. I came out on the other side of the cycle, and I had a mother who never let me forget that the cycle existed. 8 reminds you that you are always on the edge of a new beginning, that what feels like an ending is the condition of possibility for what comes next. The Beijing government didn't choose 880808 to be superstitious. They chose it because they understood that launching from a position of psychological alignment, of collective belief in possibility, is materially different from launching without that alignment. The Cologne study proved this in a laboratory. Vancouver proved it in a property market. Your wallet is a daily reminder of your relationship with wealth. What is printed or written on it shapes that relationship at the level of unconscious framing. Think about what you already carry in your wallet. Cards that tell you your name, your credit limit, your membership status. A photograph, perhaps, if you're of a generation that still carries those. Every one of those items is a piece of symbolic technology that shapes how you move through financial space. The credit card with your name embossed on it tells your nervous system that institutions trust you with their resources. The photograph of someone you love reminds you what you're working for. These are not neutral objects. They are architectures of identity. Adding 7, 8, and 18 to that architecture is not a departure from rational behavior. It is an extension of the same logic that makes you choose a wallet that looks professional rather than one that looks cheap. 18 reminds you that generosity is not sacrifice, that the Hebrew word for life and the number 18 are the same because the ancient tradition understood something behavioral economists are only now beginning to quantify, that people who give consistently develop what researchers call an abundance identity, a self-image rooted in having enough to share, and that this identity produces measurably different financial decision-making than a scarcity identity. Writing 18 on your wallet is not an incantation. It is a daily confrontation with the question, am I living as someone who has life to give, or as someone protecting against the fear of having nothing? And Proverbs 3 verse 9 addresses this directly in Solomon's own words. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. The instruction is not to give after you have enough. The instruction is to give first before the outcome is secure, as a practice of identity, not a transaction. I am someone who gives from the first portion. That is who I am. That self-definition changes the decisions that follow it. Now, I want to be honest with you about something, because I think you deserve more than a comfortable ending. When I say, write these 3 numbers on your wallet, I am not saying that the act alone will move money from elsewhere into your account. I am not my mother's grandmother sewing number pouches in Asuka in 1945. I am also not my father, who would have me believe that the meaning we assign to numbers evaporates under scrutiny. I am something in between, and that in-between position has cost me something, because what I found in those archives changed my relationship with my own identity. I had spent my career organizing myself around the implicit claim that I was the rigorous one in my family. My mother lit candles and kept number pouches. I read manuscripts. I had evidence. She had faith. And then I found out that the manuscripts were the evidence for her faith. I cannot tell you how strange it is to be sitting in an Oxford library with a photocopy of a University of British Columbia economics study in one hand and a photocopy of the Sefer Yetzirah in the other, and to realize that they are describing the same mechanism in different languages. The UBC study says, numerical symbolism embedded in physical space measurably changes human valuation behavior. The Sefer Yetzirah says, numbers are not representations of things, they are the things themselves. These are not contradictory statements. They are the same statement translated across 2,000 years and two entirely different epistemological traditions. And my mother said it without either document. She just knew. The Sefer Yetzirah did not give me a system for getting rich. It gave me something I did not know I was missing. It gave me a framework in which my mother's knowledge was not primitive. It was ancient, which is different. Ancient means that someone thought about this carefully enough, across enough generations, that it survived. My father's academic rationalism is 250 years old as a formal discipline. The Sefer Yetzirah is 1,700 years old at minimum, and the tradition it codifies is older than that. I cannot unlearn what I know now, and what I know now is that the question was never, do numbers work magically? The question was always, what do the numbers do to the person who lives with them? And the answer, documented in Cologne, in Vancouver, in Beijing, in 2,000 years of Kabbalistic practice, in the economic legislation of the Torah's seventh-year debt cycle, is that they work. Not as magic, as architecture, as the invisible structure inside which behavior happens. My mother knew this. She didn't have the citations. She had the cloth pouch and the knowledge of her grandmother and the certainty that alignment was real. She was right. I was the one who needed the citations to arrive at the same place she had always been standing. The three numbers on a wallet are not a trick. They are a question you ask yourself every time you open it. Do I believe in cycles? Do I believe in new beginnings? Do I believe I have life enough to give? If you carry 7, 8, and 18 close to your financial decisions, the science says those numbers will do something to you. Not to the universe, to you. And you are the mechanism by which everything in your life changes, or doesn't. I've been sitting with this for weeks now, not because I don't know what I think, but because I am not sure I want to be the person it makes me. The person who has to admit that the careful, documented academic version of the truth turned out to be my mother's truth all along, that the evidence I spent a career accumulating was leading me home to a doorframe in Nasuka and a cloth pouch that smelled like cedar, and something I don't have a name for in English. There's a word in Igbo, ondu. It means life. It also means well-being and health and the condition of things going the way they should go. My mother would say NDU was the whole point, that every ritual she ever practiced, the numbers, the symbols, the prayers, was just her way of staying in conversation with NDU, with the aliveness of things. I don't know if she was right about everything, but I know she wasn't wrong about this. I entered that archive room as a man who had quietly, politely, condescendingly dismissed his mother's wisdom for 3 decades. I left it as a man who owes her a conversation I'm still not quite ready to have. Because how do you say, you were right, and the evidence I trusted proved it, and I wish I had listened earlier? I don't know if there are words for that in English. I think there might be words for it in Igbo. If this journey has meant something to you, if you're the kind of person who can't let a question go until it's been followed all the way through, and you want to support what I'm doing here, the Super Thanks button is a way to say that directly. These archives take time. The manuscripts don't scan themselves. Every contribution is what keeps me in that research, turning pages that haven't been turned in decades, finding what I found tonight. Ask yourself this. Of the 3 numbers, 7, 8, 18, which one do you need most right now? 7, because you need to trust that the cycle ends? 8, because something in you knows that a new beginning is closer than it feels? Or 18, because you want to become someone who gives from abundance rather than guards against scarcity? Write it in the comments. Not as a lottery ticket, as an honest answer to an honest question. I read everyone. What you do with this is up to you. But I will tell you that I walked out of that archive room at the British Museum changed, not because I had found proof of magic, because I had found something harder to dismiss. I had found proof that my mother was a scholar. She just didn't publish in journals. She published in the lives of the people who carried what she knew. Sleep well tonight. Or don't. Like me.